Hell yeah.
It was fun.
Can't not.
No, I don't. I mean, everybody who was going to be there was there, and the money had already been lost. It wasn't like we were going to lose anymore.
Waiting on Mozart.
Hmm?
We're waiting on Mozart. Okay, plan to speak to them. Okay. Good evening. We welcome you to the second in our series of America Song. And really, we welcome you to an entire poetry and literary weekend in Vero Beach. We're aligned with the Center for Spiritual Care. We're aligned with the Laura Riding Jackson Foundation. And we are the Community Church of Vero Beach Music and Fine Arts Board, presenting this program, bringing in these fabulous musicians who are all friends of mine. I met them over the years in coming and going to the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And we have shared stages, hosted one another's events, and shared in our thoughts and our feelings for America, for the American West, for the pastoral setting that we're all part of in some fashion, some way. And anyway, welcome tonight. Thank you for being here. And as you can see, this is almost going to be like a show at the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. There's not a program. They do have a very elaborate program giving you a schedule, but we don't have an order of events. They're just going to happen. I want you to imagine that. In fact, I tried to arrange to have a fire right there, and that you were around a campfire, or that we were around a campfire, and you were just able to sit and watch and tune in. And incidentally, you're part of a live stream, and this is also going out. I should be looking up that way a little bit because many of you are out there looking in, and you're sharing this event with really a virtual audience as well. And we're so delighted. I want to introduce you to these Westerners that we brought in. Although Brooksy would argue with that, but Brooksy argues she can become argumentative. You know. I told her I think she's got a great haircut. What do you all think? I feel like I should do, "Oh, hear that old piano," you know, but this isn't that.
Saloon, yeah.
This isn't that. Let me tell you about everybody. Andy Wilkinson. is an American singer, songwriter of contemporary Western folk music and cowboy poetry. Andy was the keynote I attended at speaker at the 33rd National Cowboy Poetry Gathering, which is quite an honor. And they didn't let him do it just out of a random choice by any means. Through his poems and songs, he weaves images of people and places in telling the tales of the American West of yesterday and today. His recognitions include 5 National Western Heritage Awards from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in 5 different categories, the John Ben Shepherd Jr. Craftsmanship Award from the Texas Historical Foundation, and his induction in the West Texas Walk of Fame. Jerry, Brooksy, when you see her out there, just talk to her, say Brooksy. That's what we call her. She has loved and recited poetry since she was young. She is a reciter of classical and modern cowboy poetry, and I think it's probably correct to say Western poetry, not just make you think it's a cowboy affair, but she's shaking her head, so she's not arguing. She can recite, and this is no exaggeration, for hours. She now lives on although I think I may be wrong in saying that, but on the Spider Ranch, where Amy and Gail Steiger have run their enormous ranch in Arizona outside Prescott. And she has performed many years, and I've seen her many times at the National Cowboy Gathering in Elko, Nevada. And Shad, with whom I visited Shad in his home in Mandan, North Dakota, on a road trip all the way to Washington State, and just had the best time. He lives in the Heart River region of outside Bismarck and Mandan, and anyway, he's a saddle bronc rider. He grew up near the Mouse River south of Minot. Minot. Oh, Minot, okay. He has been a ranch hand, stockyard bird, hog hide shaver, warehouse lumper, teacher, and rodeo cowboy. And as a saddle bronc rider, he competed for the NDSU, North Dakota
State University.
Yep. In intercollegiate rodeo, and was twice the Great Plains region's bronc riding champion. So,
that was a long time ago.
long time ago. So he's also a neophyte. He teaches English. He's a private eye. He's a lot of things. I give you all of them with great pleasure. So, thank you.
Well, this is the furthest east I've ever been in the American West. Yeah, and I like it. We have an ocean in Lubbock where I live. It just doesn't have any water. It's nice and flat, just like I guess that's why I'm drawn to this place. I always say that I'm imprinted by having grown up on the Llano Estacado, the largest flat land mass on earth. And it has the greatest scenery because there are no hills, trees, or mountains to get in the way of the view. So we had lunch today at the Ocean Grill, and got to look out over the ocean, and what a terrific experience. We are so connected to place if we have our wits about us at all. And so I'd like to start with a song that I wrote after spending an evening at a cow camp in northeastern New Mexico. And I was talking with the cow puncher that lived in that camp, and you know, you always talk about the rain and the markets and the grass, and but I asked him, you know, what is the yes? Have we lost? There we go. I asked him, what is the biggest change that's gone on in this cow culture? And he said, it's the loss of the bunkhouses. Everybody's a day worker. The ranches have cut down the number of cow hands, and the problem is that there is no place for a cowhand to learn the culture and the craft, the history, because there isn't a bunkhouse. All day in the pickup, running errands to town, when I should have been a horseback, prowling some ground. What once was the orders for a half dozen hands is now the to-do list for a single camp man. The bunkhouse is empty like a hole in the night. I'll reheat some chili, drink a couple Coors Light, then I'll roll a big fatty and I'll watch the moon rise, lost in the lost lonesome high. Come a yip, come a yip, come a yippee-yi-yi, lost in the lost lonesome high. The owner's a believer in the quick profit code, plowing up the grass pastures for another dust bowl. With his big center pivots, the rangeland across, you can't navigate it on the back of a horse. The bunkhouse is empty like a hole in the night. I'll reheat some chili, drink a couple Coors Light, then I'll roll a big fatty and I'll watch the moon rise over the lost lonesome high. Come a yip, come a yip, come a yippee-yi-yi, lost in the lost lonesome high. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote calls, a cottonwood rustles, a shooting star falls. As I pull on the ember at my fingertips, I wonder, will I burn out like this? The bunkhouse is empty like a hole in the night. I'll reheat some chili, drink a couple Coors Light, then I'll roll a big fatty while I watch the moon rise over the lost lonesome high. Come a yip, come a yip, come a yippee-yi-yi, lost in the lost lonesome high. Come a yip, come a yip, come a yippee-yi-yi, lost in the lost lonesome high. Thank you.
Andy mentioned that sense of place. Now, unlike my compatriots here, I chose to go west. I'm a Westerner because, well, I'm not sure why. So I'll give at least partial blame or credit to the poetry of Robert Service. When I was very young, this poem connected with me then, and after I'd been in the West for a few years, the woman that introduced me to cowboy poetry was also a lover of Robert Service, and this was one of our common bonds. So come along with me now, if you would. Have ever you heard of the land of beyond as it dreams at the gates of the day? Alluring it lies at the skirts of the skies and ever so far away. Alluring it calls, O ye the yoke galls, and ye of the trail over fond. With saddle and pack, by paddle and track, let's go to the land of beyond. Have ever you stood where the silences brood and vast the horizons begin at the dawn of the day, to behold far away a goal you would strive for and win? And yet, in the night when you gain to the height with the vast pool of heaven, star-spawned, afar in a gleam like a valiant dream, still mocks you, that land of beyond. Thank God there is always a land of beyond. For those of us true to the trail, a vision to seek, a beckoning peak, a fairness that never will fail, a pride in a soul that mocks at a goal, a manhood that irks at a bond. And try as we will, unattainable, still, behold, our land of beyond.
Andrew, I think it's time for you to do something, don't you? I mean,
Land beyond. Sean and I had an event last night, and we were introduced by Warren. And I don't see Warren here, I don't think, but
There he is.
oh, he's in the back.
He's here.
And he told outrageous lies about us, which is great. And cowboys call that windies, telling tall tales, and that's a real Western proclivity. And so I'm going to start with a poem by a man who's been described as North Dakota's gift to the 21st century, Thomas McGrath. His great long poem, Letter to an Imaginary Friend, is something that we read pieces from or talked about last night also. But this is a poem of his called Legends, Myth Figures, Folk Heroes, and Other American Liars. Start with Davy Crockett, a legend for hire, his nose as long as a telephone wire. And he fought a bar with his pants on fire and won at the Alamo, or someone's a liar. Or take Solomon Snap, the peddling man, sold a sheep in wolf's clothing and a bird out of hand, and the bush it wasn't in, and a false tooth made of a mumbly peg, and a squirrel to nest in your basic wooden leg, or wooden nutmegs, or the wild north wind by the 30-inch yard, or in powder kegs. Last seen heading out towards the western lands with a trainload of post holes for the farmers in Kansas. Old Stormalong began at Windjammer by the Sea, who made windies and lies part of our history. Or maybe Barney Beale, who could knock down a bull until the bull got so deep he went over the hill. Or Sam Patch, the mill hand, made clothes without seams, stripped away our fig leaves and clothed us in jeans. Or in moon milky habiliments, a patch on your pride, or in spangled chaparros in which to ride westward, always westerly, toward all desires, toward mountain and ocean and the great Western liars. Mike Fink, Joe Stink, who gave the lie luster, helped by Windy Bill, and G.A. Custer. So our nation became what legend made of it. Half exaggeration, half pure bull. Shit.
Well, that kind of puts us all into a certain category of maybe liars, but I like to think about, I'm a glass half. There we go. I'm a glass half full person. And so I tend to think about liars as maybe just dreamers who tend to believe their own dreams. So I'm going to do a poem that's about dreaming and about the land I come from, where actually post holes are a valuable commodity. There's a whole canyon on the edge of the Llano Estacado called the Palo Canyon. It's not as big as the Grand Canyon, but it's spectacular, the same kind of coloring. And it's called the Palo because that means hard wood in Spanish. But if you travel there, you won't see any wood. That's because it's all been cut down to make posts for fences. And so somebody out there bought all those post holes. But the great thing about the plains to me is, as I said, it's flat and you can see beyond. You can hear beyond. Driving at night on the plains. Driving at night on the plains is a dream in glitter and black Vaseline, A dream of black velvet Elvises hung like tapestries underneath bare bulbs strung from the top of a drive-in movie screen. Driving at night on the plains is a dream. A dream of the moon in a snow cone cup, of a constellation holding it up, made up of mercury vapor light stars, headlamps of far-away slow-motion cars, and reflections of washed-out searchlight beams. Driving at night on the plains is a dream. A dream of shadows so deep and so dense that horizons evaporate into hints and innuendos of worlds without ends. Where windshields stop, infinity begins that side of glass and cold metal seams. Driving at night on the plains is a dream. Of radio tower red slow blinking lights, of strobes obnoxious in blue tinted white, of space station look-alike oil drilling rigs, pumping blackness from silent subterranean digs, where the dark is so deep that the elements scream. Driving at night on the plains is a dream. Thank you.
When Sean first asked me to come here, I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he says, well, you represent the West. And I said, well, how do I do that? You know, the West, how do you represent the West? How do you represent the mountain men, the fur trappers, the railroaders, the miners? It's not all cowboys out there, folks. So I got to thinking, and I know Sean loves Badger Clark's poetry. Charles Badger Clark, poet laureate of South Dakota, was it? He spent some time in southern Arizona on, I believe it was the I-Bar Ranch. And I came upon this poem of his, and after a few years, I realized that in some ways he kind of wrote my biography. And he called it The Free Wind. I went and I worked in a dripping mine amongst the rock and the oozing wood. For the dark seemed lit by a dollar sign, and they told me money was good. So I jumped and sweat for a flat-foot boss till his pockets bulged with pay. But my heart, it fought like a lead bronc horse till I flung my drill away. But the wind, the good free wind, she sang from the pine divide that the sky was blue and the young years few. And the world was big and wide. From the poor bare hills all gashed with scars, I rode till the range was crossed. Then I watched the glint of sunset bars and my camp sparks glinting to the stars, and I laughed at the pay I'd lost. I went and I walked in a cityway down a glittering canyon street. For 1,000 lights seemed good and gay, and they said life there was sweet. But the women laughed as the nights reeled by, and the wine ran red and gold. But their laugh was a starved wolf's hunting cry, and their eyes were hard and old. And the wind, the wild free wind, she laughed through the April rains. Come out and live on the wine I give in the smell of the greening plains. Oh, I looked back once to the smoky towers where my face had bleached so pale Then I loped through the lash of the driving showers to the uncut sod of the prairie flowers and the old wide life of the trail. I went and I camped in the valley trees where the thick leaves whispered rest. For love lived there among the honeybees, and they told me love was best. Their twilight lanes were cool and dim, and the orchards pink with May. But my eyes, they'd rise to the valley's rim where the deserts reached away. And the wind, the wild free whim, she called from the web loved spun to the unbought sand of the lone trail land and the sweet hot kiss of the sun. Oh, I looked back twice to the valley last, then set my spurs and sung. For the sun sailed up above the pass, and the morning wind was in the grass, and my horse and me was young.
So, is it wrong, Andrew, to think of the pipe organ as maybe the very first heavy metal music?
You are right. I imagine it's the same out there, but sitting up here, that's a whole body experience. So I kind of fell into cowboy poetry, never really discovered it until picked up some books by Paul Zarziski in Miles City, Montana, and through that was writing some of my own and ended up out in Elko at National Cowboy Poetry Gathering. And back in the day, they would sit around all night playing guitars, and I loved sitting around listening to them. And I fell in with some musicians. We started a little jug band in Fargo, and I played a jug. And I would bring songs and lyrics to them and stuff, and it was great fun. And finally, my guitarist just got sick of it. He said, you know, why don't you just go get a guitar and I'll teach you 3 chords. And
So you couldn't keep the jug in tune?
no, I had a hard time.
Well, the level kept dropping.
Yeah, it was tough. So this is one of the first songs I attempted, 3 chords. But it's about riding broncs, and it's about some of the broncs that I remember and got on. Headache was a great bucking horse out of the Sutton string, and Big Buck, Moonstruck, his daddy, out of the Mossbrucker string, and the Berger bucking bulls. If any of you watch the PBR, Chad Berger still has some of the best bulls around, and White Shadows was a bull his dad had, and also a Canadian horse, Silver Saddles, was, I won a lot of money on Silver Saddles, so he had a warm spot in my heart. And as I said earlier, that was a long time ago, so only broncs I ride these days are in my dreams. Some nights in my dreams, I'm sitting pretty wild and free. Other nights, nothing goes right. I'm flung on my head, a dashboard in flight. And maybe it's Big Buck or Headache, his daddy or brother Toothache. A Mossbrucker, a Corco fight, and I'm a bronc stomper, wild and tight, riding White Shadows, Silver Saddles, dream horses and cattle. White Shadows, Silver Saddles, dream horses and cattle. Mornings count the ponies I've climbed. It's only a matter of beating time. They come back, I swear that they do. And dream ponies that always jump true. And hell, there's all winning rides, and still a thrill when they make the high dive. Riding White Shadows, Silver Saddles, dream horses and cattle. White Shadows, Silver Saddles, dream horses and cattle. Cool.
So I would guess you spend a lot of time on the road.
Not as much as some, but yes. That's the dangerous part of rodeo, by the way.
Yeah. And the expensive part. Right? The road is something that, we particularly in the West think we know a lot about, but the truth is that it's an American thing. In fact, it's a human thing. Humans have been moving around from the very beginning. And so we've always been on the road, to one way or the other. And it's an interesting thing because, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, there are two great things about the road, leaving and coming back. And you can't do one without the other, and that's the other. That's sort of I guess that's the yin and yang, is it, of the road. Several years ago, I was coming back from San Antonio. I'd been a whole week in San Antonio with a fiddle player, a young gal that's really tearing it up in Nashville right now, Amanda Shire. She's just terrific. A really great songwriter, too. And a road traveler long before we started touring a little bit, and we'd been in San Antonio doing performances for the Texas Commission on the Arts, meaning we were in schools, which was a lot of fun, but the other fun was it gave you time in the evening to go out and hear some music, that sort of thing. And, but it'd been a long week, and we were headed back late in the spring, and I was rattling on about something, and I noticed I was the only one talking. And I looked over and I realized I was also the only one listening. Because Amanda was over in the passenger seat on the truck, sleeping away. And at first I was a little miffed, Why aren't you paying attention to all the wise things I'm saying? Probably she'd had all the wisdom she could stand. But I thought, what a moment this is. Is in the evening. And we were headed back to our homes in our town. And it was a chance to ride. I love to ride in the car. I text and drive, but not this kind. I have a notebook, and I can jot down little ideas. Summertime and the winter wheat is ripe out in the fields. The volunteer alfalfa blooms down the shoulder of the road. You're asleep in the shotgun seat, my hands loose on the wheel. An easy drive this afternoon, that's everything I know. Say what they will, say what they will, I don't want to get where we're going. Say what they will, say what they will, I don't mind leaving what we left behind for love, 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 down the center line. The music last night broke my heart, then it healed it back again. a process that surprises me every time we sing. They say the only certain parts are the beginnings and the ends. But I say you and I can be the highway in between. Say what they will, say what they will. I don't want to get where we're going. Say what they will, say what they will. I don't mind leaving what we left behind for love, 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 love down the center line. Summertime and the evening star is big enough to touch, where day and night meet in the west and our wishes all fly home. They may say we've gone too far, but we've not gone far enough. And I promise things will work out best when best is left alone. Say what they will, say what they will. I don't want to get where we're going. Say what they will, say what they will. I don't mind leaving what we left behind for love, 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 love down the center line. Thank you.
I get so enamored listening to Andy Wilkinson sing his songs that I just forget that I've got to do something now. Now, that last poem that I at least attempted to recite for you went slightly south, but I told you it was a bit biographical, autobiographical for me, or biographical for me. But, and that's true. I realize there's a bit of gender confusion in there, and I realize the chronology was off on the order in which things happened, but the start of that poem where I would say I went and I worked in a dripping mine, well, that's dead true. I spent 27 years underground in coal mines in Utah. And that the sense of mining, there's mining poetry out there that I adore every bit as much as I adore cowboy poetry. If we have to, classify in poetry, which is kind of silly, isn't it? Yeah, it's all poetry. We all share these stories, but this story came to me. Shad mentioned Paul Zarzinski, and Ed Leahy in Butte, Montana, was a good friend of Zarzinski's, and he kind of turned me on to Ed Leahy's poetry. Butte, Montana was the largest industrial city west of the Mississippi for a long, long time. And they mined copper, the biggest copper deposit. And this story comes out of that. And in my mind, we're speaking of the West and all these connections. The poem is called Blind Horses. And I just want you to think about what we as a nation owe the horse. The old man in the hospital bed with his horny yellow foot stuck through the stainless rails claimed that July night, the one he picked to die on, he smelled sulfur in his gown. When he was my age, he worked the lower levels of the Lex in a great underground corral. Yoked iron tongue to wagons filled with ruby silver and peacock copper rock. Flaked sweet hay to the horses. Shot the worn out. Dozens of tramway horses hauled hard against whipple trees, rubbed the timbered tunnels clean, pulling down the crib drifts, brass lanterns swinging, work bits in their teeth, slick with the mine damp and cold to the touch. Dry stalls in the cross-cut cave of that stone corral caught fire in '98. The horses, tunnel blind from lack of light, burned up in the green flame that licked the lagging black in the Lexington mine. I met his eyes, cracked white like a drunk's who hasn't had a drink in the month. He said he could hear hoofbeats ring and click against the granite footwalls. He complained of being cold. His nostrils flared. I can hear him breathing, Ed.
One nice thing about a round robin is sometimes you want to do some things that you weren't going to do. And I was talking with Dick here, who hails from Mobridge, South Dakota, and I love how Mobridge got its name. It's just Missouri Bridge. They put a bridge there, and that was Missouri Bridge, or Mobridge. I had a friend come from Fargo, and he's used to the Red River, where there's a bridge pretty much, every 10 miles, 20 miles. He came to Bismarck and decided he was going to drive down what's called 1804, which is a highway on the east side of the river, named for when Lewis and Clark first hit there in 1804, and the other side of the other road is 1806 when they came back. And he started driving south from Bismarck, thinking there was going to be a bridge that he could cross over and get to Mandan. And he said, God dang it, there was no bridge. I ended up in Mobridge. So this is another one by Thomas McGrath. Remembering Stephen Vincent Benet, Trailblazers is the title of it.
Say the title again.
Trailblazers, Trailblazers. Through the Cumberland Gap to the wilderness trace, to the Natchez trace of Stephen Vincent Benet, to Sault Ste. Marie and Mackinac, to Warriors Path and to Santa Fe, by the Erie Canal and the Sioux Canal and the Welland Canal up to Montreal, and by the Old Post Road up Boston Way down to Monterey on El Camino Real. On the Red River Trail, either south or north, to Fargo and Winnipeg, or toward Fort Worth. On the Bath Bay Express, toward Union Square, or to Scully Square, or to Rittenhouse Square, through Dead Man's Pass in the whirling snow, toward Happy Camp or Sutter's Mill, and on we go. On the Bozeman Trail and the Chisholm Trail and the Bonner Pass to Half Moon Bay. On the UP, the SP, the cold NP, the Salty Dog, and the old KT. Turn right at Texas toward Poker Flat, and we'll sleep tonight in Medicine Hat.
Well, you're right. You have something planned and somebody does something and you say, no, I've got to do this, not that. Andrew's been making a living out of that tonight, And a good one. So, in Texas, we have a system of roads called ranch roads and farm-to-market roads. And it's one of the grander things we have, these little two-lane roads out. The whole state is covered with them, and they're macadam or asphalt. They're not that clay that they're so fond of in Nebraska, which is passable only about twice a year, and it covers you with dust on those 2 days. And if there's the slightest bit of humidity, which of course there rarely is, but they won't work at all. But our farm to markets go through a lot of open country, and they connect the little towns and the farms to larger towns and so forth. And there's one that's one of my favorites, Farm to Market 168. It runs north and south, pretty much. And there's a stretch of it, though, that runs from Buffalo Lake to the little town south of it called Nazareth, which is a little Catholic town with a parish and a lot of Catholic people. In fact, we have Catholic towns all through the panhandle of Texas. They were settled by Catholic priests who'd come out, and it's really a great thing. The town I was born in, Slayton, Texas. I was born in Mercy Hospital, a Catholic hospital. And, you know, I knew about people being born in other countries, and they were nationality of that country. And so for years I thought, even though we were Methodists, I thought, well, I was born Catholic. Anyway, there are a lot of those. But between Buffalo Lake and Nazareth, FM 168 leaves the farmland around Nazareth and winds up in the ranch land around Buffalo Lake. And along that road are a lot of those fence posts I told you that came out of the Palo Canyon. But it's just a beautiful road. It's one of those places that is open and really speaks to me, at least. So this is FM 168, Buffalo Lake to Nazareth. This road lay like an invitation south from the commercial highway, straight into the Llano Estacado's rolling gut, where tides of grass rose and fell in pastel yellow swells beneath a blue beyond which there was no cause for sky, where taut fences with steel goat head barbs and stout cedar posts kept cattle in communion, tractors out, and left the wind to wander at her will. The sweet insinuation of this road was a highway cafe waitress winking as she licked her pencil lead and asked me what I wanted. Was a rodeo queen with a quirt in her teeth, a barrel horse between her legs, and her saddle slick jeans smoother than sweet cream. Was an angel wing lost in the sun but circling shadows down to the center stripe as mercy given. Like a superstition, this road prickled the hair on the back of my neck, made me sit up straight in the seat of my old van, made me crank the windows down and snap the radio off, made me hold the wheel light like reins and let the Chevrolet have her head and roll like she and this road knew one another well in that life where journey and destination were the same.
And now, I hope I didn't depress y'all with that last poem. Please don't be depressed. I have a friend from Australia. We were doing a session one time, and I developed kind of a reputation for, knowing a lot of dead horse stories. And he said one time, I started into one of these kind of stories, and Milton said, "Oh, here we go, another slash your wrist with Brooksy session." I said, okay, well, yeah. But I'm going to spring one on you. I could kind of change pace. This one, it might be. I'm not a morbid person, really, I'm not. But I absolutely adore this story. It was written by a man pretty special to a lot of us involved in poetry in the West. He was so much about inclusiveness and bringing everyone into the fold when it came to telling these stories. After he died, his widow and daughter, Betty and Amanda, gave me this poem and said, "Would you please start doing this poem?" How do you turn down a gift like that? So, Buck Ramsey's poem, Bonnie Trina. She was giving birth to her first child when Bonnie Trina died. All the leaves were out. The trees were full of flowers. She'd known fiddle all her life. For 2 years been his bride. But the time seemed more like a few good hours. There'd been mention of some neighborly assistance at the birth, but she wanted only Fiddle, and then the child. He had felt her thrilling pangs. He had felt her painful mirth. And he felt her cries, and then failed to feel her smile. Fiddle felt his whole world tumbling down when Bonnie Trina died, and the boy brought little to his aching heart. No one knew, would ever know how much or if he cried. Never know how deep the dying made its mark. In the darkness of the morning, he came knocking at the door of a neighbor's place 2 hours' ride away. "Could you tend this boy?" he asked the wife, and muttered a little more while the morning sun came, bringing on the day. As the woman tended to the child as if he were her own, Fiddle and the man warmed hands around their coffee. In a while, he spoke. "I reckon we will lay our Bonnie down in the river grove." Fiddle spoke so softly. "You recall we planned to gather from the river in the morning for some sorting and count and move the yearlings. So we'll meet there at the river for our Bonnie's next sojourning. Maybe you could do the proper sermonierings. Tell the boys to bring the horses that they gather pastures on, and we'll gather out that pasture from the river. I'll just leave her where I loved her best. It's better done at dawn." Yeah. That's the kind of fare thee well she'd have us give her. So they gathered at the river, and they buried her at dawn by a meadow, neath the cottonwood, full leaf. She shall be in league with rocks and fields. The speaking wasn't long. And the boys all pulled their cinches and rode off with their grief. As he told off all the riders and they dropped off on the drag, Fiddle dropped the gray with Bonnie Trina's saddle. They met later at the common hold. The gray come with the jag, about as many as the other riders' cattle. Through the days, Fiddle made the cuts. The gray turned back the herd at the place where he'd been posted on the hold. When the work was done, the boys loosed their cinches and lingered. Each would know his leaving time and not be told. Fiddle turned his blue roan loose and laid his saddle by the barn. Then he loosed the gray, set that saddle by. When he laid his head down on his own and wrapped hers in an arm, all the boys knew that leaving time was drawing nigh. Fiddle sleeps, and Bonnie rests. And the horses, too, untethered, seemed to tarry. And the baby boy is lying still and growing at his ease. And the cattle scatter loose out on the prairie. Buck Ramsey.
I guess I started going down this road, and so there's no way but through, with that last poem, which was for Stephen Vincent Benet. And recently, one of my sons told me that they were watching the film Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and I said, you know, that's a great book. No, he didn't know that, so I went and found him a copy. And I said, you know where that book gets its title? And he didn't, and I asked him if his teacher knew where that book got its title. But it got its title from American Names by Stephen Vincent Benet. I have fallen in love with American names, the sharp names that never grow fat, the snakeskin titles of mining claims, the plumed war bonnet of Medicine Hat, Tucson, Deadwood, Lost, Mule, Flat. The Sen and Piave are silver spoons, but the spoon bowl metal is thin and worn. There are English counties like hunting tunes played on the keys of the postboy's horn. But I will remember where I was born. I will remember Carquinez Straits, Little French Lick, and Lundy's Lane, the Yankee ships and the Yankee dates, and the bullet towns of Calamity Jane. I will remember Skunktown Plain. I will fall in love with a Salem tree and a rawhide quirt from Santa Cruz. I will get me a bottle of Boston Sea and a blue gum minstrel to sing me the blues. I'm tired of loving a foreign muse. Rue des Mars, Bleeding Heart Yard, Senley, Pisa. It is a magic ghost you guard, but I am sick for a newer ghost. Harrisburg, Spartanburg, Painted Post. I shall not rest quiet in Montparnasse. I shall not rest easy in Winchelsea. You may bury my body in Sussex grass. You may bury my tongue at Champendie. I will not be there. I will rise and pass. Bury my heart at Wounded Knee.
Do we have time for another round, Sean?
Or half a round.
Well,
Yeah.
this is maybe an ending poem for me, but this is a poem that is inspired by Buck Ramsey and about place names. Buck and I traveled many years together, and it was one of the wonderful experiences of my life. We went to various events to do poems and songs and cowboy gatherings from one end of the nation to the other. And we talked often about how cool it would be to have a little small gathering where it wasn't about putting on a big show or making a big deal out of everything. And so, and Buck wanted to make it out in ranch country where it would be difficult for city people to get to. And he found a place that was so far out, even the ranch people found it difficult to get to. But he found this little town, well, he knew about this little town in northeastern New Mexico, just past Dalhart. The only town in New Mexico that's on Central Standard Time. It's called Naravisa, 2 words. Naravisa, what a beautiful name. No one knows what it means, except everyone knows it's really not Spanish. How did it happen? No one knows. So it's a place name without really a place, I guess. Or it's a place without a name, I don't know. But there was this great gathering that several of us started. The Naravisa, what else? A poetry gathering. And Buck wrote the very first letter of invitation, and it said basically, whatever money we'll have, we will not divide evenly. We're going to divide it not by whether you're famous or not, but by how far you had to travel to get here. This is a very egalitarian system. There was a little schoolhouse, an abandoned schoolhouse, of the time when schoolhouses had an auditorium on the 2nd floor. I don't know where that came from, but you'll find them all over America, so you have to go up these little stairs to get to it. But it had beautiful acoustics, and there was a little, the old cafeteria was used for people from those ranch families would bring in food, and it was great. And so Buck sent this letter out saying that about the money, and then he said at the very end, he talked about what the purpose was, and the last line was, "No stars need apply." So we enjoyed it very much. For several years, it was a spiritual time and a spiritual place. So this is a poem, Benediction, after a gathering of cowboy poets. It's night in Narragansett, perfect black. September waxing moon an equal white. No shades of gray between them and the light that boils out of the windows in the back behind the kitchen counter. It is gold and pools like lava out into the night to puddle in the parking lot in bright, translucent patches on the dust. An old melodic fiddle tune escapes in sharp staccato batches from the dance hall, slight as red and orange leaves in scattered flight upon a staggered wind. Within this warp of time and space, I nurse a plastic cup of warm tequila, vapors coiled up tight around my head, its sweet primeval bite upon my lip, my aching tongue curled up, vibrating like a snake's. I'll taste it yet with you, this hum of poetry. The trite and clumsy, helpless passages I write, they will be brilliant gems you'll not forget. They'll burn the miles between us like the names of every passion, every appetite, and all the incantations that ignite in cool New Mexico my heart to flames. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This concludes our evening. We're accepting a free will offering on your way out. We hope that you'll be generous. We brought these people in from afar. And another hand for our great poets. And of course for Andrew, he can break wind with the best of us cowboys.
That's really, really wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We've got more